Okay, everybody, so let's combine what we are learning in science about the states of matter with what we are learning in English about where our food comes from. Back to our textbook that we read together on Wednesday when we had our meeting together. So we read this story, Where Does Food Come From? And there were many things that you were surprised by, right? And we didn't have too much time to talk about it, but I told you I would find you some videos so that you can see a visual. So who remembers what this first picture was? Nobody knew what this was. I'm going to put it side by side. It says cocoa beans. Cocoa beans are seeds. They grow on cocoa trees. Chocolate is made by crushing and cooking cocoa beans. Hot cocoa is made from chocolate. All right, so I am going to put a video on for you and so that you can see a little bit more about the cocoa bean.
What is cacao? Have you ever wondered which ingredients go into making chocolate? Would you be surprised to learn that one of the main ingredients is a kind of seed that looks like this? The seeds grow on cacao trees, which can be found in warm tropical regions, such as here in the Ivory Coast, which is on the west coast of Africa, nearly 3,000 miles away from the United Kingdom. They also grow in lots of other countries in the tropics, such as Ecuador, Brazil, and Indonesia. This is because all of these places are warm and humid. The cacao trees produce large, colourful pods that look like this, hard and melon-shaped. They grow straight from the trunk and larger branches of the trees. And once they have ripened from green to yellow, red or orange, the farmer knows they're ready for harvest. There are a few different varieties of cacao. The trees resemble apple trees and grow no more than 25 feet tall. The farmer harvests the cacao pods using a very sharp blade. It's hard work in the hot sun, but the farmers are very skilled. The pods are then cut open to reveal the white fleshy fruit and seeds inside. They typically contain more than 50 seeds each. As you can see, the fresh seeds don't look anything like chocolate at this point. They're not even brown in colour. The seeds are then taken to a processing house. First, the seeds are placed into wooden boxes like this and covered with large banana leaves to protect them. This process allows the seeds to develop a richer flavour and is known as fermentation. During fermentation, the seeds turn from white to brown. Once they are fermented, the next stage is to dry the seeds. This takes around a week, and during this process, the dried seeds lose so much water that they end up around half their original weight. They are now called cocoa beans and look like this. Next, the cocoa beans are roasted in a machine. Roasting makes sure that any bacteria that might be present is killed, and it also helps to give the beans a nice flavour and colour. The roasted beans are then winnowed. This process separates the outer husk so that only the inside remains. The inside is the most important part, as this is used to make the chocolate. The beans are then ground and heated so that they melt into what we call a chocolate liquor. Once the chocolate liquor has cooled down, it sets and becomes what is called cocoa mass. It is then ready to be transported by ship to factories all over the world, where it will be made into tasty chocolate for you to enjoy as a treat.
All right, so that was pretty amazing, wasn't it? Can you imagine what when you open those cocoa pods, what that looks like inside? Who would ever imagine that that is where chocolate comes from, right? It said that the cocoa beans lose so much water that they lose half of their weight, right? You saw them shrink down. Now, what do you think happens? How do they lose water? It doesn't mean they lose water like, oh my gosh, where did I put my water? That's something else, right? When they lose water, what it means is that the cocoa pods or the cocoa beans, they have water, they have moisture inside of them. But when they dry them out, what do you think happens to the moisture? They showed you a picture of it, but they didn't really explain it. You saw these little lines going up like this when they said that they lost their water. What it means is that the water evaporated. And to evaporate means when you have a liquid and it turns into a gas. Okay, so it evaporated into the air and turned into gas, into the air. All right, so that's one way that we combine our science with what we're reading in English through our food, right? And that's part of the process to turn a cocoa bean into chocolate, is evaporating the water, turning it into a gas, and getting rid of the moisture so it's dried out and can be ground up. All right, next, milk comes from cows or sometimes from goats. Butter, cheese, and ice cream are made from milk. So has anyone ever seen how you can make cheese? We're going to look at it right now. So I'm going to put another video on for you so you can see how cheese is made.
Today on Ever Wonder, we're at Calkins Creamery, a dairy farm that makes cheese. Emily and Maggie are going to show us their process. There are many different types of cheese, but the first step is always milking the cow. The milk is stirred in the pasteurizer, which heats up and kills off bacteria that naturally lives in the milk. Starter cultures and rennet are added, which helps to make the milk curd and stick together. After stirring and resting, the cheese becomes wobbly, which means it's almost ready. After it becomes more solid, they divide the cheese up into small squares. The extra liquid from the cheese, called whey, is drained out, and the cheese is stirred again. After it's completely drained, it's divided and then hooped, which is when they put it in different containers. It looks like popcorn. This cheese is wrapped up in a cheesecloth and then pressed, which gets rid of the excess moisture and forms the shape of the cheese. This other cheese is being poured into molding containers and is then flipped several times. Cheese can also be dipped in wax, left to grow mold around it, or soaked in a brine for more flavor. Next time you're eating a delicious cheese curd, be sure to thank your local cow.
All right, so that was pretty cool and different, right? Now, here's another example of a liquid turning into a solid. Did you see how the cheese starts off being milk, which is a liquid, right? You could pour it into a cup, you could pour it into a bowl. It changes shape and takes whatever form of the container that it's in. It is a liquid. But through the process of turning milk into cheese, they remove a lot of the liquid, they squeeze it out, they press it out, and it turns into a solid, right? If you put a piece of cheese on your plate, it's not just going to start transforming, right? Like a milk would, it wouldn't spill all over. Milk spills because if it's not in a container, it just spreads all out. Cheese wouldn't do that. If you put a piece of cheese down, it's going to stay right on your plate because it's a solid. Honey is made by bees. They bring the nectar of flowers to the hive. Now, it seemed like everybody knew about this the other day, right? That honey is made by bees. But on the next page, we have maple syrup. It says maple syrup is made from sap. The sap drips from maple trees. So everybody was very interested in that one, and nobody seemed to know about it. So I have another video for you to watch about how maple syrup is made and what sap is and how it actually comes from a maple tree. Enjoy watching.
Today on Ever Wonder, we're going to find out how maple syrup is made. Kristen and Andy run Journey's End Maple Farm, and they'll show us how it's done. Maple syrup comes from maple trees. The first step is to drill a hole in the tree and put a spile in so the sap can drip into buckets. Tubing can also be used to collect the sap. The farmers go around gathering the sap from the trees. Then they pump the sap into the sap house. It goes through a filter and then into a big storage tank outside. For sap to turn into syrup, it must be boiled for a long time. These machines are called evaporators. They have many channels to help take the water out of the sap. Andy waits for the bubbles to look just right. He then tests the syrup to see if it drips off the pan in sheets. This process is called sheeting or a maple syrup drip test. After going through the evaporator, the sap is transferred and boiled again in the finishing pan. Here, Kristen stirs and uses a hydrometer to check the thickness of the syrup. Then, after the bottles have been sanitized, they are filled with maple syrup and eventually brought to pancakes everywhere.
All right, so was that cool or what? And who discovered that? Can you imagine? At some point, somebody discovered the sap coming out of the tree and figured out the process of turning that sap into syrup, which is pretty amazing. And the next time you eat pancakes or waffles, you will be very happy that they did. Now, again, we saw, this is the third video, and the third video where we see how science plays a role in the food that we eat, right? Because the maple syrup, when they take the sap out of the tree, if you noticed, it was very clear and it was very liquidy, almost like water. It's made of water and sugar. That's what the sap is. But that's not what you eat. They take that, and when you saw that they brought it in, they put it in a machine that's actually called an evaporator. And who remembers what evaporate means? We just talked about it. Evaporate means to turn from a liquid into a gas, right? And so what that means is that they boiled it. They boiled it. It means to cook at a very high temperature. And when you do that, you've probably seen that when your parents cook in the kitchen. When you boil water, all this steam comes off. Some people will say, oh, look, it's smoke. It's not smoke, it's steam, right? Because it's water evaporating and turning into air, liquid turning into a gas. So it takes the water out of the sap. It turns the water from a liquid into a gas, and we are left with syrup. Awesome. So there you have it, science in your syrup. Where does your favorite food come from? All right, so I don't expect you to be able to tell me or to explain in writing where your favorite food comes from, but I do want you to tell me what your favorite food is. And the other day I asked all of you and I got all different answers. I got pizza and chicken parmesan and guacamole and ice cream and cheeseburgers and did I say pizza? Pizza and Oreo chocolate ice cream and Oreo cookies. So you know who you are and what your favorite food was. So I want you to write next what your favorite food is. I will show you the picture. Okay, and this is where you will write it. What is your favorite food? Write your opinion about your favorite food. Okay, I'm also providing you with a graphic organizer to help you in your writing. It helps you organize your ideas and write more quickly. So in the middle box, please write what your favorite food is. And in the other 4 boxes, you can write why it's your favorite food. And then you can describe it. What does it look like? What does it taste like? How do you make it? Whatever you want to write, it's your writing. Just make sure that it's a paragraph, right? It's 5 sentences. So I hope you enjoyed learning the vocabulary for science and how we can use science when talking about our food and where it comes from. All right. Enjoy writing and have a fantastic weekend. I will see you on Monday.